Another subject for this forensics are impressions. Impressions are marks left behind that can be used. Footprints, tire tracks, some marks that are impressed on, on a surface. Either they might be deep, they might be on the surface, they might even be hidden. But these can be used for evidence, and they you really have to study them in a as part of forensics. You can start the study by recognizing what happened in the trial of someone called Orenthal James Simpson. Uh, what happened was two people, Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman. They were murdered outside Nicole Brown's home, and they blamed Orenthal James Simpson, who apparently was married to her sometime before the crime. They found a very good bloody shoe print. It was very good. It was a size 12. Well, Orenthal James Simpson, he had a size 12 shoe. So, that's really not enough to convince anybody. A lot of people have size 12. And they actually publicized these shoe prints. And they were looking for the kind of shoe that this would fit. Now, eventually they found it. It turned out that these were extremely expensive and rare shoes. And only the Bruno Magli company, I don't know, I've never heard of them before. Probably their shoes cost about as much as a car that I might want to buy. Anyway, so no, I don't buy their shoes. But Orenthal James Simpson was rich, at least at the time. And they were very rare. Only 29 pairs of them were ever sold in the United States. So it's pretty clear that whoever made this bloody shoe print was at the crime scene, and you could find that single person because there were very few people who could have possibly been. So the obvious question was, did Orenthal James Simpson own that pair of shoes? And he was a size 12, and he was a suspect. He said he never owned those shoes. And more or less in his words, he said he would never wear anything that ugly. Later, so they really did not find the one who made those shoe prints. But later on, they actually found that they have pictures. They found pictures of Orenthal James Simpson wearing these same shoes before the murder. So he definitely had them. When he claimed he didn't have them, he was a liar. So they could have used that in the trial. Unfortunately, the trial was over and he was declared innocent before they could actually use all this evidence. That there were very, very few people in the world who were wearing these shoes, and Orenthal James Simpson was one of them. And therefore, that would really connect him, provide a good connection between him and the one who did the crimes. But the evidence wasn't ready before he was declared innocent. Anyway, we do see that impressions, including footprints, can be very useful in solving a crime. Tool marks and other impressions are very often found, especially when during home break-ins, you use tools like maybe a crowbar or a screwdriver to find your way in or to break your way in. Others, they come just not from deliberately performing the act in order to do the crime, but incidental actions like shoe prints. I mean, they're not trying to make shoe prints in order to do the crime. They just happen to be there. So the truth is that fingerprints are also impressions, and gun striations that was mentioned in the lecture on guns, they're also technically impressions, but we'd like to give them their own category because, after all, guns. So, where do tool marks come from? And usually they're made when you try to use tools to commit a crime, which is breaking into a home or into a safe. Now, the marks that are made, they are usually class characteristics, like the width of it, or of the crowbar, or maybe the shape of the crowbar tip that was used. Again, that's class characteristic because crowbars, you can sell like 50 crowbars in town with the same, with the same type, same width, same shape. So those are class characteristics. They're useful, but they're not as good as what individual characteristics would be, which would identify it to the single specific tool that made the marks. The individual characteristics are the nicks, the scratches that come from, you've seen tools before, you've owned tools, they develop nicks and scratches that are unique to your tool, and someone else's nicks and scratches are going to be very different. So if we can identify what the tool mark and the nicks and scratches on that, we can compare it to the tool mark of the suspect and actually identify the tool that was used in the crime, and therefore the person who did it. So we'll talk about collecting the tool marks. What you should do, if possible, is not to just take a picture of the tool mark. If possible, take the entire location of the tool mark. If you find it on a small rock, then you just take the whole rock to the lab to analyze it. If it's found on let's say a giant rock, it's a tool mark, but you can't take the giant rock there. So what you have to do is first photograph it, and make sure there's a ruler right next to it, so you know the scale of this mark. Also, of course, the resolution of the picture has to be good. And we also, if possible, we try to lift the mark, remove the mark in some way. If it is a tool mark, now not necessarily a footprint, a tool mark, which usually gouges or gouges, it leaves like a deep mark, what we do is we want to make a cast of it. So for small marks, liquid silicone is very often used. It's a casting resin. What you do is you push it on the mark, then wait for it to dry and pull it off. And what gets pulled off is an imprint of the exact tool mark. Now, again, some tiny little scratches will not come from this, and they may actually be found in the photographs. Nevertheless, enough are going to be available to study and to get these individual characteristics, and it should be good enough. So let's take a look at what an expert on the entire field of forensics has to say. He is the one who wrote the book on forensics that we are looking at.
How are tool marks collected and analyzed in CSI?
Well, that will depend on the location of the tool mark. What's best is to take the tool mark in its entirety back to the crime lab in its native state. But often that can't be done. You can't remove windows and doors for many types of crime scenes. So an impression will be made at such a crime scene, usually with silicone putty. And then the silicone putty impression will then be brought back to the crime laboratory for further analysis.
Yep, he's the one who wrote the book. He really is good at his job. But let's get back to us. So one of the rules are do not do your own. If you're collecting the evidence and the tool mark, and you found what you suspect is the tool, don't play detective at this point by putting the actual tool next to the tool mark and seeing, hey, look, I see the scratch in the tool. Looks like the scratch in the wall. Don't do that, because when you put it against the wall, you might scratch the tool. So then when it goes back to the lab, they're going to say, hey, wait, it looks a little different. And you know what lawyers are going to do about that? Wrong tool, bad forensic practices, ineptness. Okay, so you don't want to do that. The pictures, by the way, can be lined up well enough. The collection of tool marks and finding the nicks on the tool and comparing it to the tool marks at the actual crime scene, it's done